Do you have the gift of gab and like talking about interesting topics? Are you often called opinionated by your friends and family? Then come to Anchor, where you can be all of the above and get paid for it. Along with being one of the easiest systems to create contact with, Anchor supplies everything you need and can be used from your smartphone or computer. They even distribute your content for you so that you can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more. Just download the Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. Hello, Internet family. This is Anjanette Potter, also known as AdamsRib. It is Wednesday, October 23rd, and it is 5:18 as I'm recording this. So this is my review of the movie Dolemite Is My Name, starring Eddie Murphy. So to give you a little bit of background on the film, it was directed by Craig Brewer, who is responsible for Hustle and Flow back in 2005, which won the Audience Award at the Sundance Film Festival. Also got an Academy Award for Best Original Song with It's Hard Out Here for a Pimp. So, which I think that's 3-6 Mafia. So the film Dolemite Is My Name is what is considered to be a biographical comedy film. It was written by Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski. Okay. They are a screenwriting team that also brought us Problem Child back in 1990 and Ed Wood in 1994, along with The People versus Larry Flint. So the stars of the film. So let me give you that. Eddie Murphy stars as Rudy Ray Moore, who is the comedian that invented the persona of Dolemite. So Eddie is a comedian, musician, singer, film actor. Oh, wait a minute. Excuse me. I'm looking at my chicken scratch here. Actually, Rudy Ray Moore is the comedian, musician, singer, film actor, film producer, famous for the what they call alter ego Dolemite, derived from the mineral Dolemite, also called Dolostone. So let me give you a little bit of history on the character if you're kind of new to the whole Dolemite persona. Dolemite is a character that comedian Rudy Ray Moore created in the 1960s. So he was based on stories that he was hearing from a local homeless man by the same name. So the guy called himself Dolemite, and he would come in where, Rudy Ray Moore was and tell stories and everything. So Moore paid the man for his stories and used them to create an alter ego that he used in his comedy routine. So when he featured Dolemite in several comedy albums, which in the movie, if you get it, if you go to see it, it's in the theaters in a few days, because this is the 23rd. So in a couple of days, it's going to be streamed on Netflix. I highly recommend it. And in fact, I highly recommend that you stream the movie itself and watch it and do like a double feature. So you watch Dolemite itself and then watch the movie. So that way you have a little bit of background and know exactly where they're coming from with this. So he recorded several comedy albums with the persona of Dolemite from 1970 to 1975. Dolemite was basically what old school comedians used to call blue humor. Blue humor is humor like Red Fox, Richard Pryor, I'm trying to think of a few other. Mom's Mabley might be a little bit on the fence there, but basically it's humor, that has to do with adult subject matters. I'll put it that way. So, in 1975, Moore decided he wanted to create a feature film with the character and paid for most of the production. So he was a bit of ahead of his time. He was actually Spike Lee before there was a Spike Lee. So, and Robert Townsend before Robert Townsend. So if you've ever heard their stories about how they financed their films before they became big, Rudy Ray Moore kind of, came out of that. So he paid for the production out of his own pocket, most of it. He also had, people who helped him out, using friends and fellow comedians as cast members. And this information is also available in Wikipedia. So a few fun facts about the original Dolemite. It was directed by D'Urville Martin. Now D'Urville Martin, if you're like me and you're into watching some of these old 70s nostalgia films, D'Urville Martin played the first Lionel Jefferson on The Jeffersons. We mostly associate that character with Mike Evans, but before Mike Evans got brought in to play him on a regular basis on All in the Family, and then later on The Jeffersons, D'Urville was the first Lionel. So when the character first got introduced on All in the Family, which is where The Jeffersons came from, this guy played him. He also had a extra part in Black Like Me. He also had an extra part in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. And so, some of the history I read on him, I'm like, they don't really give him a whole lot of justice, because he also is in a movie. If you watch some of the, like I said, if you watch some of the older films on some of the channels that specialize in those older films, he played the one brother in Five on the Black Hand Side. So he was the brother that the Glenn Turman character accused of dating a white girl. Yeah, that guy. So Wesley Snipes played the part in Eddie Murphy's film. Eddie Murphy's film. The original Dolemite was written by Jerry Jones, and the music was furnished by Don Cornelius of Soul Train. So Don Cornelius helped him out with the music. The budget for the original Dolemite was $100,000, but the box office for the original Dolemite, $12 million. Yeah. So now we can go to now for the movie. Dolemite Is My Name is being distributed by Netflix. They went ahead and opened it in theaters, but it will be streaming in 2 days on October 25th. It's going to be streaming on Netflix. So it'll be available to stream in your home. So probably there's no available box office receipts, so we don't know how well it's done yet. Okay. The release date was the 1st of September at the Toronto International Film Festival. Then it was released in the U.S. on the 4th of October. So they plan, and once again, as I said, they plan on digitally streaming it on the 25th, which is this Friday. So this is Eddie Murphy's first mainstream film since 2012. His first R-rated film since 1999, which sounds about right. I think once he became a dad, like once he got married to Nicole Murphy and had his first daughter with her, seemed to switch up and started doing a whole lot of family friendly films. But one of the things that I like is that he showed that you can be versatile. Because many times with black comedians, like, people have a tendency to stereotype. And I remember when he and Whoopi Goldberg first made the scene, like, people, would bag on them about their language. And I'm like, well, most people know how to tone down their language when they get in a, arena where it calls for them to tone down their language. So one of the things he showed was that he was able to be just as funny and still do family films. So I thought that was interesting that it was his first R-rated film since 1999. I was like, wow. So this movie, if you go see it at the theater, I liked going to see it at the theater because sometimes I just like the whole going to the movie experience. You don't always want to watch everything in your living room. So this was an all-star cast. Keegan Michael Key, Mike Epps, Craig Robinson, which I forgot how well Craig Robinson can sing. Titus Burgess, not to be confused with the guy who outed Bill Cosby or loud talk Bill Cosby. My mom got him confused. Divine Joy Randolph, Wesley Snipes, Alexander Philomonic, Tip T.I. Harris, Chris Rock, Ron Cephas Jones, Linnell, Gerald Downey, Cody Smith, McPhee, Tommy Earl Jenkins, and Snoop Dogg. Now, like as I said earlier, there was no box office information available. There's no box office information available yet, so we don't know the budget that they used to have to make the film, and we also don't know how well it has done so far. My thoughts on now we get to the nitty gritty. Like, Anjanette, what do you think about the film? This film is awesome. I'm gonna give you my rating right off, and that is first run. It was worth every bit of my first run dollars. It was very engaging. I knew before I went to see the film, I was like, they picked the perfect person to play Rudy Ray Moore. So if you are a Rudy Ray Moore fan, if you're like me and you're old enough to remember Rudy Ray Moore and remember him as Dolemite and remember the Dolemite films, I didn't get to hear none of his I may look him up on Spotify. But if you're old enough to remember the Dolemite films, then you recognize that Eddie Murphy was the perfect person to play this. And I say that because if you've ever seen Eddie in film, Eddie's funny stand-up. He's hilarious. My favorite Eddie Murphy is Delirious. If you see Delirious, now it's not politically correct by any stretch of the imagination. So if you are easily offended, then it is not the film for you. Everybody wants to play Raw. I'm like, I think Raw is good. I saw the Raw, but my all-time favorite is going to be Delirious every time. Me and my friends told them jokes. I mean, we wore them jokes out for the longest time because it is so funny. And, he delivers every time. He's had maybe one or two films that you look at and go, Eddie, I don't know. But he's always carried them, so he delivered. I had no doubt that he was going to bring it. So he was the perfect person to play this part. This and the upcoming Mr. Rogers film with Tom Hanks, I'm going to predict that these will be the feel-good films of 2019, since we're in October already. So these will be the ones that make you go and make you have a good feeling. Everybody's smiling leaving the theater, and you just have just bubbling and on the inside. This was one, that film, and I really think that the Tom Hanks one is going to be with Mr. Rogers is going to be the other one. My mother, the Queen Mother, even suggested that this should give Eddie a Oscar nod. That's how good this film is. So I highly recommend it. Represent. You could feel one thing about Eddie Murphy is that he's kind of a man of 1,000 faces. If you remember the Nutty Professor films, where he played all them different characters, and you remember Coming to America, where he played him and Arsenio played all them different characters. So he brought justice to the whole. He was Rudy Ray Moore. He became Rudy Ray Moore. The last 3 films I have looked at, these had 3 of some of the best character actors. Will Smith, like if you ever saw Ali, and I recommend you see Ali, Will Smith became Ali. Well, if you are an Eddie Murphy fan, I'm a diehard Eddie Murphy fan. And you see how he turns into character. I've been a fan since Saturday Night Live. Okay, so this is a brother that's kept it strong the whole time. So you hear, when you watch this film, you feel Rudy Ray Moore's frustration at trying to break into the entertainment industry, and feeling like he's running into these different roadblocks and feeling like he's not getting any support from his friends. I think we all have been there. From his initial comedy act to trying to get distribution for his film. So at each step, it's like every step that he was at, he was like, I can take this thing further. And he took it further and succeeded at taking it further. So by the time it's all done, you want this guy to win. You are rooting for Rudy Ray Moore, and you want him to get this done. So to give a little bit of background about the movie, because like I said, I like to do my my reviews. I like to give some history and background because I think it fleshes it out and makes it a little bit more interesting. So hopefully, I'm not boring you with all of this history. But in order to get a feel for this movie was set in the post-civil rights era during the 70s. So the movie, Eddie Murphy's movie is about a movie that was made during these post-civil rights era. During that era, Gerald Ford was president, and it was an era for a lot of black firsts. Shirley Chisholm ran for president in 1972. The Bake decision about affirmative action and reverse discrimination. So the Bake decision, if you want to look it up, Bake was this white guy who sued because he couldn't get into this university because of, he said the complaint was that he had better marks than any of the minorities that got in. So he was basically calling affirmative action reverse discrimination. Keep that in mind. When something, I remember reading this book called A Hero Ain't Nothing But a Sandwich. And one of the characters talked about reverse discrimination. And he talked about the fact that when something goes in reverse, that means the opposite of how it's supposed to go, right? Yeah. So reverse discrimination is basically discrimination that's going against the way that it should go, which means it's okay when it's against someone else, but it's not okay when it's coming against you. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, the next thing that happened, Barbara Jordan was one of the first black people to be elected to Congress. Tom Brady was elected mayor of Los Angeles, and that was in 1973. Maynard Jackson in the same year was elected mayor of Atlanta. Henry Aaron, in 1974, Henry Aaron hit 715 home runs, beating Babe Ruth's long-standing record. Clive Hercule. Now this one, for some of my hip-hop heads, will love this one. Clive Hercules Campbell, also known as Kool Herc, started using two turntables and chanting rhymes over the beats, forming the basis of rap music. So this was in 1974. In 1975, Arthur Ashe wins is the first black person to win Wimbledon. Robert Hayden was the first African American to become a U.S. Poet Laureate. 1977, Roots aired. And 1979, Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang was released, and later on that year, Curtis Blow released Christmas Rapping. So it gives you some insight. Yes, I love being black. This gives you some insight into how long, and they never thought that hip hop would last as long as it is, and it's now 2019. So, the importance of this film. So why do you think that it's important why do you think that this film was an important film or an important biopic to make? Number one, this film was made during the period called the Blaxploitation period. Now, they called it Blaxploitation. Of course, Blaxploitation is a play on the words black and exploitation. So, the Blaxploitation period of the 70s produced some really good films. It is also one of those. It's also one of the periods of time where those films kind of got blamed for black people only being able to find. Before that period, it seemed like black people were only able to get bit parts and play the help, play maids, the elevator guy. One of the things that's mentioned in the movie about the character, about the director of the original Dolemite, was that the guy worked in Hollywood, but he did bit parts. If he was in a movie that had a large white cast, he would probably get a bit part like the butler or the elevator guy. So prior to the points where Shaft, Coffee with Pam Grier, and I'm trying to think, the Blackula movies, if you are a horror movie buff like I am, the period of film that the Wayans brothers make fun of, and I'm gonna get you, sucker. So before that point, we were lucky to be the maid. We were lucky to be, any of that. Then Blaxploitation came along, and there were more of us working. There were more of us in starring roles. One line that not breaks my heart. One line that really touches me is the comedian, the lady that plays Queen Bee, talks about, she's heavy set, dark complected, how probably a woman who looked like her would have never had a starring part in a movie prior to her working with Rudy Ray Moore. So, and think about how we are now, 2019, and we are still battling some of that stuff. So, while these the Mac, while the 70s Blaxploitation films were very landmark and very, very groundbreaking for a lot of actors and actresses, and created a lot of work for a lot of black actors and actresses, the downside to that particular particular period of film, and black film anyway, is that then it seemed like we switched from being maids. It seemed like we switched from being maids and butlers and hired help to now we became pimps and prostitutes. So that's one of the reasons why this film is so important, and why Rudy Ray Moore was so important, because what he couldn't do through the Hollywood studios, he went ahead and did on his own. And then once other people saw it and saw how well he was doing on his own, then other studios wanted to work with him then. And like I said, this is a film that cost $100,000 to make, and it wound up being a comedy. It wound up being a film, so he was even a little bit ahead of the Wayans brothers as far as being able to poke fun of that whole period and the way those movies were made. The way the movies were made, all of the action, the plot lines and everything. So he was really ahead of his time. And so, like I said before, one of the reasons why I feel like Eddie Murphy was the perfect person to play him is because of Eddie being a legend in his own right. And especially Eddie is not that old. By the time, Eddie is in his 50s or whatever, and many comedians before Eddie haven't done even as much as Eddie at the age Eddie is. So that's something. Anyway, like I said, so that's one of the reasons why this film is so important, because this is a class. I predict this will be a classic, but it's a classic about another classic. So this is why I said, if you're going to wait for it to come on Netflix and watch it, I highly recommend that you see the original Dolemite that this movie is based on, so you can see Rudy Ray Moore in action, the real Rudy Ray Moore in action, and then you'll have a better understanding and better appreciation of the Eddie Murphy film, because it really tells the story about that whole process. Anyway, that is my review. Like I said, my rating for it, I give it first run. And since it's going to be on Netflix in a couple of days, first run Netflix. It's worth your Netflix dollar. So this weekend, I also have Friday night, I will be doing Eclectic Weekends. I was going to do jazz, but since we're talking about Eddie Murphy's, since we're talking about Dolemite Is My Name being released on Netflix or dropping on Netflix this Friday, I'm gonna do comedy. I'm going to do comedy to celebrate this film. If I can find Rudy Ray Moore and I can find some of that Dolemite stuff, I will play the Dolemite so that you guys can hear him in action. So it's going to be 11 o'clock at night, so most of your kids won't be up or will be busy in their bedrooms listening to their own stuff. So you want to hear some Dolemite, some Richard Pryor, some Eddie Murphy, if I can find a couple of his comedy albums. If you want to hear some comedy this Friday night, then I'm going to be playing comedy at 11 o'clock on Friday night with Eclectic Weekends, because I keep saying, comedy requests, and nobody's making any comedy requests. I'm a music person, but I love good comedy, and I love to be able to laugh. So I'm going to go ahead and play comedy in order to celebrate this film being dropped on Netflix. I'm going to go ahead and do comedy this Friday night. So I will be looking up, and I'm going to go ahead and try to find Rudy Ray Moore's Dolemite. See if I can find a couple of Dolemites to play, a couple of things to play or whatever. So I'll be playing comedy. I'm also going to be, this will be the second leg of my book blog, Bookworm, participating in Women on Writings blog book tour for Antoinette Truglio Martin's cancer memoir, Hug Everyone You Know. So that's going to be going on this Friday. If you're listening to this review on YouTube, please click the button if you like the content that I'm doing. If you want to comment and say, Anjanette, this, whatever. I mean, anything that you want to add to this conversation, you're more than welcome. I don't only do book and movie reviews. I actually also do social commentary. I have 7 blogs now that I've added to the family. So we're doing that. But if you like this content, please, if you're listening to this from YouTube, please click the like button to let me know how well you like it. Also, click the subscribe button so that you can get my content into your email box, and then you don't have to worry about coming all the way to the YouTube app. You can just listen to it from your inbox. Also, this is, usually goes, anybody who's listened to my stuff, I usually wind up going to podcasts before it goes to video. So if you are interested in listening to a podcast, I am available on iTunes and several other podcasts, and several other podcaster. Okay, sorry about that interruption. I do these recordings from my phone, so someone interrupted. Anyway, I was just finishing the last part of what I was saying. So anyway, you pretty much got everything that I was saying with the first take and everything. So I'm just coming back in to sign off and do my little closing and everything. So anyway, this is Anjanette Potter, also known as AdamsRib, and I will be posting this tonight, so you guys will hear it on the podcast first, and then of course with me it's podcast first, then I will put it on YouTube second, and then it usually makes its way to the blog that this will be going on will be Out and About, and I will have the list of the rest of the places that my podcast is available. Anyway, I love you guys. Have a good hump day. Have a good rest of the week, and you will be hearing from me on Friday. Bye-bye. Hello, you have reached the message line for AdamsRib Media Ministry. If you would like to give me a shout out, recommend some topics for discussion, or give an opinion about some topics that I've already discussed, either here on my podcast or on my blogs, leave me a message and I will get right back to you. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.